But this is a canal? How is this a... Look, there's the building there. How is this a canal? Unless Broad Street is... No. No, it is. How on earth is this a canal? All the way down here? I don't even know. I'm not sure, guys. Unless we can... Alright, let's go to Google Maps. And go to New York. And Maps. Alright, close that. Earth. Now, what are we looking at? Broadway. No, Broadway is that... No, that is Broadway. There must be something off with the... No, Broad Street is next to it. This is Broadway. Broadway... We are on Broadway. Broad Street is the one next to it. But in the game... It's... wrong? I think? Broad Street... Where does it end? Federal Reserve Bank of New York. I'm not sure what we're looking at. There might be something odd with the map. Look. No. Well, there's something odd here because this is... Did they just shift this over? Because look, Broadway... I don't know what we're looking at, but whatever it is, it's not historically accurate. Unless this is reclaimed land. It might be reclaimed land here, which means that I still don't really understand what we're looking at. As far as I can tell, we are on Broad Street. Federal Hall. Yeah, it must be. It must be. It's a really long canal though. If this whole thing was a canal, it's a really long canal. Alright, well, there's that. Back to the database, locations, New York. Broadway, which is the street next door. Yeah, so yeah, the one next door is Broadway. This is one of the oldest streets in New York City, if not the oldest, since its origins go back even before the days of New Amsterdam. It started out as the Wickersgek Trail. I don't know if it's bad transliteration or if I just can't pronounce Native American. Used by the indigenous peoples to cross Manhattan Island. It was turned into a street by the Dutch who called it Breedeweg, literally Broadway. In modern-day New York, the street begins at the Bowling Green and extends across the entire island of Manhattan, through the financial district and past Times Square and Columbia University. Of course, at the time you're visiting, Broadway ends at the City Common. The most famous stretch of the street, the theater district, is still wilderness, so you're more likely to catch a bullet there than a show. Alright, well, let's go look up Broadway. Broadway's gonna have a massive history to it. Broadway, Manhattan, New York. Wait a minute. In New York City, Broadway, Manhattan. Although it goes through... Right, where do you go? Amazing. That's the longest street I've ever seen. That might be the single longest street in Manhattan. Alright. Broadway is a road in the US state of New York, perhaps best known for the portion that runs through the borough of Manhattan in New York City. It actually runs 13 miles, 21 kilometers through Manhattan and 2 miles through the Bronx, exiting north from the city to run an additional 18 miles, 29 kilometers through the municipalities of Yonkers, Hastings-on-Hudson, Dobbs Ferry, Irvington, and Tarrytown, and terminating north of Sleepy Hollow in Westchester County. That is the longest road ever. Like it's just one road. Um, it is the oldest north-south main thoroughfare in New York City, dating to the first New Amsterdam settlement. The name Broadway is the English literal translation of the Dutch name Breedeweg. Broadway is known widely as the heart of the American theater industry. Broadway was originally the Wickersgek Trail, carved into the brush of Manhattan by its Native American inhabitants. This trail originally snaked through swamps and rocks along the length of Manhattan Island. So even back when it was just the Native Americans before the white people came, they already had the road. So roads are important, guys. Even when you are pre-industrial, roads are important. Pre-literate? The Native Americans didn't have writing, right? Yeah, so even if you're pre-literate, roads are important. Upon the arrival of the Dutch, the trail soon became the main road through the island from New Amsterdam at the southern tip. The Dutch explorer and entrepreneur David de Vries gives the first mention of it in his journal for the year 1642, the Wickersgek Road over which the Indians passed daily. The Dutch named the road Herenstraat, although current street signs are simply labeled as Broadway. In the 1776 map of New York City, Broadway is explicitly labeled Broadway Street. In the mid-18th century, part of Broadway in what is now Lower Manhattan was known as Great George Street. In the 18th century, Broadway ended at the town commons north of Wall Street, where the traffic continued up the east side of the island via East Post Road and the west side via Bloomingdale Road. The western Bloomingdale Road would be widened and paved during the 19th century and called the Western Boulevard, or the boulevard north of the Grand Circle, now the Columbus Circle. On February 14, 1899, the name Broadway was extended to the entire Broadway-Bloomingdale Boulevard Road. Alright, so it didn't used to be that long, but Broadway kind of just assimilated Bloomingdale and Boulevard Road together. Do we traffic flow? Don't really need that. Route, Lower Manhattan. More interested in the history. We don't really need the modern description, I don't think. Anyway, so it started off as a relatively short road, although under the Native Americans it was a pretty um, frequently used path. We don't really need to look at it again. We've seen it a few times. So let's go back to New York and King's College. Oh, that's King's College. King's College looks just like the prison, except without the bars. So if you take the bars away from the prison, you have pretty much King's College. They look pretty much the same. King's College first opened on the first floor of the Trinity School in 1754, but it moved to the building that you see here in 1760. The building survived the fire in 1776, but it wasn't being used as a school at the time. It had been shut down under the orders of the Continental Army and turned into a hospital. It didn't open again until war ended, when it was given a new name, Columbia College, another example of the word king falling out of favor among the Americans. The college stayed here until the mid-19th century, when it moved to Midtown. The building's cornerstone was moved to the new location, but the rest was torn down and the land underneath it was sold at a tidy profit. Alright, so again, the building is in the game is not in real life anymore because it was torn down. Let me just go back over here so we can get a look at King's College in the game. I wonder if it will be in Wikipedia. Maybe not. History of Columbia University. So there it is there. It really does look very much like the prison. Alright, well there it is. It's fairly large. Given the size of the city, it's fairly large. One of the important buildings. Let's see. I don't think King's College will give us what we want here. Predecessor to no UK, no United States. King's College, New York. The colonial era name of Columbia College, Columbia University. Columbia College is the oldest undergraduate college at Columbia University, situated on the university's main campus in Morningside Heights in the boroughs of Manhattan. It was founded in 1754 by the Church of England as King's College, receiving a royal charter from King George II of Great Britain. Columbia College is the oldest institution of higher learning in the state of New York and the fifth oldest in the United States. The college is highly selective in its admissions. For the class of 2015, the college accepted 6.4% of its applicants, the second lowest acceptance rate in the Ivy League and in the country, behind Harvard. It accepted 6.4% of applicants. Right. Columbia College was founded as King's College by royal charter of King George II of Great Britain in the province of New York. In 1754, due in part to the influence of the Church of England religious leaders, a site in New York City in the Trinity Church Yard, Wall Street on the island of Manhattan was selected. Okay. Samuel Johnson was chosen as the college's first president and was also the college's first and for a time only professor. During this period, classes and examinations, both oral and written, were conducted entirely in Latin. In 1767, Samuel Bard established a medical college in the school, now known as the Columbia University College of Physicians and Surgeons, which was the first medical school to grant a Doctor of Medicine degree in America. Due to the American Revolutionary War, instruction was suspended from 1776 until 1784, but by the beginning of the war, the college had already educated some of the nation's foremost political leaders. Even at this young age, King's College had already educated Alexander Hamilton, who served as military aide to General George Washington, then as the first Secretary of Treasury and author of most of the Federalist Papers. John Jay, the first Chief Justice of the United States, Robert Livingston, one of the Committee of Five who drafted the Declaration of Independence, and Gouverneur Morris, who authored most of the United States Constitution. Hamilton's first experience with the military came while a student during the summer of 1775 after the outbreak of fighting in Boston. Along with Nicholas Fish, Robert Troup, and a group of other students from King's, he joined a volunteer militia company called the Hearts of Oak and achieved the rank of lieutenant. They adopted distinctive uniforms complete with the words Liberty or Death on their headbands, and drilled under the watchful eye of a former British officer in the graveyard of the nearby St. Paul's Chapel. In August 1775, while under fire from HMS Asia, the Hearts of Oak, the Corsicans, participated in a successful raid to seize cannon from the battery, becoming an artillery unit thereafter. They stole someone else's cannons and then afterwards became an artillery unit. Ironically, in 1776, Captain Hamilton would engage in the Battle of Harlem Heights, which took place on and around the site that would later become home to its alma mater more than a century later, only to be entombed after his dueling death some years later at the original home of King's College in Trinity Churchyard. With the successful Treaty of Paris in 1783, the domestic situation was stable enough for the college to resume classes in 1786. With the new nation's independence from the Kingdom of Great Britain, the name of the institution was changed from King's College to Columbia College, the name by which the institution continues to be known today. The college was briefly chartered as a state institution lasting only until 1778, when due to a lack of public financial support, the school was permitted to incorporate under a private board of trustees. Oh, I see. It was briefly chartered as a state institution, but there wasn't enough money, so it became a private College. Under this 1787 charter, this 1787 charter remains in effect. The renamed and reorganized college, located in the new national capital under the Constitution, and free from its association with the Church of England, students from a variety of denominations came to Columbia as a response to its growing reputation as one of the finest institutions of higher learning in the new nation. There's a picture of the building, by the way. After a brief period of being housed in another lower Manhattan building on Park Place, near the current location of New York City Hall, in 1857 the college moved to 49th Street and Madison Avenue in Manhattan. During the college's 40 years at this location, in addition to granting the Bachelor of Arts and Doctor of Medicine degrees, the faculties of the college were expanded to include the Columbia Law School, the Columbia School of Mines, now known as the Full Foundation School of Engineering and Applied Science. The Columbia School of Mines awarded the first PhD from Columbia in 1875. At this time, Columbia College was now not only the name of the original undergraduate college founded as King's College, but it also encompassed all of the other colleges and schools of the institution. Though technically known as the School of Arts, the undergraduate division was often called the college proper to avoid confusion. After Seth Low became president of Columbia College in 1890, he advocated the division of the individual schools and colleges into their own semi-autonomous entities under the central administration of the university. The complexity of managing the institution had been further increased when Bernard College for Women became affiliated with Columbia in 1889, followed by Teachers College of Columbia University in 1891. Also by this time, graduate faculties issuing the Doctor of Philosophy degree in Philosophy, Political Science, and the Natural Sciences had also developed. Alright, I don't think we need to read much more because it's just going to be a long history that's not in the game. Hold on. Literature Humanities, Core Curriculum, series of mandatory classes and distribution requirements that form the heart of it. Literature Humanities, Contemporary Civilization, Art Humanities, Music Humanities, University Writing, Foreign Language, Frontiers of Science, Science Core, Global Core, Physical Education. Wow. That stuff is mandatory? You have to... This is mandatory? That's a bit harsh. Never mind. Anyway, so the college hall, which is what we're interested in now, looks like that. It's wider and shorter than the thing we see in the game, isn't it? Hold on. 131, 131, okay. And then 4 modules, and then the rest of it. Let me go back into the game. 131, 131, 131. Yeah, that's right. That's right. It seems... Maybe I'm just looking at it wrong. So look at how wide it is compared to how tall it is, right? And then the picture... No, I think it's right. I think it's actually right. Alright, so they just... That's pretty good. They just took the picture and then made it in the game. Good job. It is a very good recreation. Yeah, they just made it. I really do appreciate the dedication to accuracy, to architectural history in this game. Good job, guys. Not sure about the plots though. We're missing a few missions, but the architecture, good job. What do we have next? Fort George? This fort has seen several name changes. It started off as in 1625 as Fort Amsterdam, protecting the original Dutch settlement of New Amsterdam. Since then it's been known as Fort James and Fort William before changing sex to Fort Anne, then swapping back in the 18th century to Fort George. When the Revolutionary War ended, Fort George was torn down, perhaps predictably given that this latest name was in honor of the king. Um. All right. Well, I don't think we're gonna find that in Wikipedia. Fort George. In the United States, Fort George, Fort Amsterdam. 5 different forts. Let's go to Fort Amsterdam. I think that's the one that we're looking for. Yeah. So it's quite big, isn't it? Look how big it is compared to the rest of the city, unless the map is not to scale. Fort Amsterdam, subsequently named Fort James William Hendrik James again, Henry, Anne, and then George, was a fort on the southern tip of Manhattan that was the administrative headquarters for the Dutch and then the English-British rule of New York from 1625 or 1626 until being torn down in 1790 after the American Revolution. It was designed by Kryn Fredericks, chief engineer of the New Netherland colony. The fort was to change hands 8 times in various battles, including the Battle of Long Island in the American Revolution, when volleys were exchanged between the fort and British emplacements on Governor's Island. The construction of the fort marked the official founding date of New York City as recognized by the Seal of New York City. In October 1683, what would become the first session of the New York legislature convened at the fort. Guns at the fort formed the original battery that is today called Battery Park. Maybe we should look at that. The fort's site is now occupied by the Alexander Hamilton U.S. Custom House, which currently houses the George Gustav Hayes Center, part of the National Museum of the American Indian. Interesting. Battery Park? So it's kind of there. Let's see. Flagpole. We're not going to find Battery Park in the game though. So let's go back to Fort Amsterdam. In fact, let me just go over there right now and have a look at it in the game. So it should be just... There's no fast travel to the fort itself. Is it actually in the game? Maybe we haven't even found it yet. Alright, so... Is this it? I think... Oh, this is it, isn't it? What's further that way? It's kind of small. Is this right? I don't know if this is correct. Maybe it is. No, actually, no, I don't think it is. I think it's a bit too small. Also, the gate is closed. How do we get up? Can we get up into the fort? We don't seem to be able to go up into the fort. Nope. And nope. Alright, well this is the best we can do with what the game gives us. Nope, we can't do that. Alright. Let's go back to this. Alright, history. Dutch rule. The site of the fort is now the Alexander Hamilton U.S. Custom House, which prior to landfilling and the creation of Battery Park was at the shoreline. Oh, the shoreline. Okay, I see. Alright, Broadway. Yeah, okay, Broadway is correct. I was wondering why Broadway was in the wrong place, but it's because there's been reclamation on to the west of Broadway. So Broadway, so here's the old map. Oh good, here we go. So this is what the place actually looks like in the game. So Broadway is there, and then Broad Street is there. Oh, there's the canal too, amazing. You can see it. So there's Broad Street there, and there's Broadway there. And Battery Park is here, where the water is, but they filled the land in there. I mean, they filled the water in to make land. Alright, I get it. Alright, cool. The fort was the nucleus of the New Amsterdam settlement, with a mission of protecting New Netherland colony operations in the Hudson River against attack from the English and the French. It is sometimes asserted that around 1620 the Dutch East India Company contacted the English architect Inigo Jones, asking him to design a fortification for the harbour. Jones responded in a letter with a plan for a star-shaped fortification made of stone and lime and surrounded by a moat, and defended with cannons. Jones advised the company against constructing a timber fort out of haste. The involvement of Jones cannot be corroborated with reliable documentary evidence, so that's just a story, there's no proof. The building of the fort commenced in 1625 or 1626 under the direction of William Verhulst, the second director of the New Netherland colony, and his chief engineer Crin Fredericks. At the time, Manhattan was only lightly settled, as most of the Dutch West India Company operations were upriver along the Hudson in order to conduct trading operations for beaver pelts. English rule 1664-1673, that's a different map. These old maps are fascinating. Look, the canal is still there. There's the fort. Fascinating. And there's Long Island. And there's Hudson River. The mainland. Amazing. On September 8th, 1664, the Dutch surrendered the fort and New Amsterdam in what amounted to one of the skirmishes in the bigger Second Anglo-Dutch War. The fort was renamed Fort James in honor of James II of England. New Amsterdam was renamed New York in recognition of James' title as Duke of York. Dutch rule again. In August 1673, the Dutch brought in a fleet of 21 ships and recaptured Manhattan. The fort was renamed Fort William Hendrik in honor of the Dutch leader, who was the stadtholder and Prince of Orange. New York was renamed New Orange. The Dutch attack was part of the bigger Third Anglo-Dutch War. In 1674, the fort and New Orange was turned back over to the English in the Treaty of Westminster, which ended the war. The Dutch got Suriname. English rule. The English once again named the area New York and returned the Fort James name. During this period, Thomas Dongan, 2nd Earl of Limerick, who was the royal governor of New York, convened the first legislature of New York in October 1683 for a meeting at the fort. Dongan was also the first to establish batteries of cannons just to the south of the fort. Colonist rule in 1689, German-born colonist Jacob Leisler seized the fort in what was called Leisler's Rebellion and enacted a government of direct popular representation. By some counts, he also moved to redistribute wealth to the poor. Interesting. That lasted for 2 years. Leisler's rule ended in 1691 when British sovereign William III of England sent troops to evict him. The fort had earlier been named for William when he was the head of the Dutch government. He was to become the sovereign of the English government by the overthrow of James in the Glorious Revolution. The fort was then renamed with a new anglicized Fort William Henry name. Oh, I see. The fort continued to be named for subsequent British sovereigns, Fort Anne and Fort George for the succession of George monarchs. 92 guns were added to the battery in 1756. The fort became the target of American rioting following the Stamp Act, 1765, in which the guns at the battery were spiked. In the American Revolution, the colonists under George Washington seized the fort in 1775, before the colonies formally seceded from the British Empire. During the Battle of Long Island, guns from the fort engaged British frigates starting on July the 12th. Between September the 2nd and 14th, the fort and British guns on Governor Island exchanged volleys. The British recaptured the fort along with Lower Manhattan in September and were to rule New York from the fort throughout the war. And then the Americans took over the fort in Manhattan on the evacuation day, November 25th, 1783. The fort was torn down in 1790 and the government house intended as the presidential residence was built on the site. However, the need for new fortifications soon became apparent, and in 1798 guns were placed in temporary fortifications on the battery. Eventually, a new fort, Castle Clinton, will be built just before the War of 1812. Alright, so there's the history. Mostly name changes. Not that many actual battles, but the name changed quite often. Interesting. There's no plan of... I guess this is the best plan we have, like it's a star-shaped fort like that. And the building is on the southwest side, so maybe it's actually quite accurate. Maybe they actually, yeah, they're on the southwest side, kind of. Not really. Never mind. It's kind of accurate. There's a W. Oh, that's Washington. W on my map. Alright, what's the next thing we can look at? Locations, New York. HMS Jersey, that's a ship. Oh, that's the ship out in the ocean. The British took so many prisoners during the Revolutionary War that they quickly ran out of places to put them all. Prisons in New York, like the Broadway, were full, and the British took to using sugar houses and pro-rebel churches in the city. In the harbor, decommissioned warships were put to use as prison ships, the most well-known being the HMS Jersey. The Jersey had and earned the nickname Hell. I wonder if you can guess why. Conditions below decks where the prisoners were kept were crowded, 1,000 men crammed together without light, sanitation, or proper ventilation. About a dozen prisoners died every day from smallpox, yellow fever, malnutrition, and torture by the guards. I'm not even going to begin describing the food. Alright. The British sentiment was the rebels were traitors and didn't deserve any better. At least 11,000 people died on board the prison ships, more than the rest of the war put together. After the British left New York, the US Navy found mass graves in the mud at the edge of the harbor. Those remains have since been placed under a monument in Brooklyn where Fort Putnam used to be. That's terrible. So it was a prison ship out in the harbor. HMS Jersey. This one. Wow. Terrible. Alright, let's read about it. HMS Jersey was a 60-gun, fourth-rate ship of the line of the Royal Navy, built to the 1733 proposals of the 1719 establishment of Dimensions at Plymouth Stockyard, and launched on the 14th of June 1736. She is perhaps most noted for her service as a prison ship during the American Revolutionary War. Jersey was built during a time of peace in Britain, length 44 meters. I don't think we need the details of those. Alright, in the war. In March 1771, Jersey's masts were taken down, and then she was made a hospital ship in Wallabout Bay, New York, which would later become the Brooklyn Navy Yard. When the American Revolution began, the British used her as a prison ship for captured Continental Army soldiers, making her infamous due to the harsh conditions in which the prisoners were kept. Thousands of men were crammed below decks where there was no natural light or fresh air, and few provisions for the sick and hungry. James Forten was one of those imprisoned aboard her during this period. Political tensions only made the prisoners' days worse, with brutal mistreatment by the British guards becoming fairly common. As many as 8 corpses a day were buried from the Jersey alone before the British surrendered at Yorktown on the 19th of October 1781. When the British evacuated New York at the end of 1783, Jersey was abandoned in the harbor, having had approximately 8,000 prisoners on board. 8,000 prisoners! One of the most gruesome chapters in the story of America's struggle for independence from Britain occurred in the waters near New York Harbor, near the current location of Brooklyn Navy Yard. From 1776 to 1783, the British forces occupying New York City had used abandoned or decommissioned warships anchored just offshore to hold these soldiers, sailors, and private citizens they had captured in battle or arrested on land or at sea. many for refusing to swear an oath of allegiance to the British Crown. Some 11,000 prisoners died on board the prison ships over the course of the war, many from disease or malnutrition. Many of these were inmates of the notorious HMS Jersey, which earned the nickname Hell for its inhumane conditions and the obscenely high death rates of its prisoners. Christopher Vale of Southold, who was aboard Jersey in 1781, later wrote, "When the man died, he was carried up on the forecastle and laid there until the next morning at 8 o'clock, when they were all lowered down the ship's sides by a rope around them in the same manner as though they were beasts. There was 8 died of a day while I was there. They were carried on shore in heaps and hove out of the boat on the wharf, then taken across to a hand barrow carried to the edge of the bank, where a hole was dug 1 or 2 feet deep and all hove in together." So 1 or 2 feet deep? That's not even a hole. Like, how do you... 2 feet deep? That's barely enough to bury a person. In 1778, Robert Sheffield of Stonington, Connecticut, escaped from one of the prison ships and told his story in the Connecticut Gazette, printed July 10, 1778. He was one of 350 prisoners held in a compartment below the decks. The heat was so intense that the hot sun shining all day on deck that they were all naked, which also served well to get rid of vermin, but the sick were eaten up alive. Their sickly countenances and ghastly looks were truly horrible, some swearing and blaspheming, others crying, praying, and wringing their hands, and stalking about like ghosts, others delirious, raving and storming, all panting for breath, some dead and corrupting. The air was so foul that at times a lamp could not be kept burning, by reason of which the bodies were not missed until they had been dead 10 days. That's terrible. They basically just dumped them there and left them there to rot. The Department of Defense currently lists 4,435 US battle deaths during the Revolutionary War. Another 20,000 died in captivity from disease or for other reasons. Estimates of deaths aboard the New York prison ships vary around 8,000. Prisoner exchanges were hardly possible for 2 reasons. The British often captured far more prisoners than the Americans did, and George Washington did not favor exchanging veteran British soldiers for ragtag American troops, as it would only put his army at a greater disadvantage. Accounts of imprisonment on HMS Jersey are American Heritage Magazine and on prison ships. What? Oh, that's just the quotes. Rediscovery of the Jersey during October 1902 as the keel of the ship, the USS Connecticut, was under construction in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. The Brooklyn Daily Eagle reported that the HMS Jersey had been found. While power driving a new dock, the wood from the ship was encountered precisely where the burnt hulk was reported to lay after the British abandoned the ship and she was set on fire. Alright, well, they were dumped into the hold and left to die. Let's see, interior. Interior of the old Jersey prison ship in the Revolutionary War. I'm pretty sure it was worse than that. Somebody drew this based on their imagination. But from what it sounded like, it was worse than this. Yeah, alright. Do you need to see it? No, we're not gonna go see it, are we? No, we're not gonna go see it. It's all the way out in the water. Maybe we can, like, see it from the harbor or something. I think it's in this direction. Is it? Let me just look. It's very far out in the ocean. And I don't really want to go all the way out there to find... There it is there. We can swim out there. Let's do that last. Alright, what we're gonna do is look at the town hall first, because that's like the last entry in the Animus. And then we'll go swim out there to the boat and see what amazing things we find there. Locations, New York. And City Hall. So that's the City Hall there. This building served as New York City Hall starting in 1702. It was also the city jail until the new gaol opened in 1759. Despite New York's historically loyalist leanings, the building has a decidedly rebel-slanted past. Delegates from 9 of the colonies met here to coordinate protests against the Stamp Act. That meant representatives from British-instigated legislatures were protesting what British Parliament thought best, a truly huge step at the time. After the Constitution was ratified in 1789, Congress began to meet here and the building renamed Federal Hall. George Washington was inaugurated as president on the balcony on April 30th, 1789. The building was expanded in 1788 but torn down in 1812. Despite its name, the modern-day Federal Hall National Memorial in New York City was never actually Federal Hall. Alright, so again, it doesn't exist anymore. Maybe it's gonna be in the Wikipedia? Possibly not. So it's around here. Can you please not parkour? So this is the City Hall of New York. Federal Hall, New York. Federal Hall. That's the memorial, it's not actually the hall. Wait a minute. That's not what it looks like in the game. At all. Wow, that's not at all what it looks like in the game. Federal Hall, built in 1700 as New York City Hall, later served as the first Capitol building of the United States of America under the Constitution, and was the site of George Washington's inauguration as the first President of the United States. It was also where the United States Bill of Rights was introduced in the first Congress. The building was demolished in 1812. Historic building. The original structure on the site was built as New York City Hall in 1700. In 1735, John Peter Zenger, an American newspaper publisher, was arrested for committing libel against the British royal governor and was imprisoned and tried here. His acquittal on the grounds that the material he had printed was true established the freedom of the press as it was later defined in the Bill of Rights. Huh. Alright, so if what you're saying is true, you're allowed to say it. In October 1765, delegates from 9 of the 13 colonies met as the Stamp Act Congress in response to the levying of the Stamp Act by the Parliament of Great Britain. Drawn together for the first time in organized opposition to British policy, the attendees drafted a message to King George III, the House of Lords and the House of Commons, claiming entitlement to the same rights as the residents of Britain and protesting the colony's taxation without representation. After the American Revolution, the City Hall served as the meeting place for the Congress of the United States under the Articles of Confederation. From 1785 until 1789, acts adopted here included the Northwest Ordinance, which set up what would later become the states of Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin, but more fundamentally prohibited slavery in these future states. Interesting. In 1788, the building was remodeled and enlarged under the direction of Pierre-Charles L'Enfant. Oh, it was remodeled and enlarged. So the pictures we see here is the enlarged building, it's not really the original. Okay, maybe the game is correct. Who was later selected by President George Washington to design the capital city on the Potomac River. This was the first example of federal-style architecture in the United States. It was renamed Federal Hall when it became the first capital of the United States under the Constitution. In 1789, the first United States Congress met here on March the 4th, 1789, to establish the new federal government, and the first thing they did was count the votes that elected George Washington as the first President of the United States. He was inaugurated on the balcony of the building on April 30th, 1789. Many of the most important legislative actions in the United States occurred within the first Congress at Federal Hall. Foremost was the proposal and initial ratification of the Bill of Rights to the U.S. Constitution. 12 amendments to the Constitution were initially drafted, 10 were later adopted. And on September the 25th, 1789, the United States Bill of Rights was proposed in Federal Hall, establishing the freedoms claimed by the Stamp Act Congress on the same site 24 years earlier. Also, the Judiciary Act of 1789 was enacted in the building which set up the United States federal court system, which is still in use today. You know, there was a time when the Congress actually did useful things, unlike today. Alright, so we don't really need to read the rest, because the rest is basically just a memorial. And there's no pictures of the original Federal Hall, but here's a picture of it after it was renovated. Yeah, I don't know how accurate it is. Apparently the renovation added a central bit. I don't know how accurate that is. Alright, do we need to look around this thing anymore? I don't think so. The building's not that complicated. There's the balcony though. So I'll pretend to be George Washington. I'm just gonna stand on the balcony here, right? No, the other side. Alright, George Washington was inaugurated right here. Let's go swim out to the HMS, what's it called again? HMS, what was it called again? I forgot the name already. Let's see if I remember it by the time I get out there. We were just reading about it. The name of the ship is... It's the name of a place. HMS Jersey. Yes, HMS Jersey. Maybe that's why New Jersey is the way it is, because it's named after this prison ship. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to anybody who actually is from New Jersey. Oh, we can't go out there? Are you kidding me? We can't go out there anymore? Oh, come on. You have got to be kidding me. You let us go out there during the mission, but you don't let us go back there. Oh wait, never mind, I can go out there, never mind. Or can I? No, I can't. No, we can't go out there. Are you kidding me? Well, we're still going towards it. Maybe we can go. No, we can. Okay, good. Why would you cut off that bit of water then? Anyway, alright, here we are. HMS Jersey. Let's see if we can just climb up the staircase on the side and just shoot everybody who gets in our way. It's a pretty big ship. It's a fourth-rate ship of the line. I don't know if you guys understand the terminology, but like a ship of the line. Basically, they categorized according to how big they are. A first rate is the biggest, I think. Hold on, is it? Line of battle adoption, evolution of design, number of guns, steam power. Hold on, reservation. It's not really useful, is it? So a fourth rate is not really the biggest. Although the biggest ones, I mean, the problem with a big ship is that it's also slower and less maneuverable. So I mean, if you get outmaneuvered by a smaller ship, I mean, it doesn't really matter if you have more cannons if you can't actually hit the other ship with your cannons. So size isn't everything. A ship of the line, type of naval warship. Ship of the line have fallen into disuse except in historical context. Predecessors, line of battle adoption, evolution of design. Let's see. In the 17th century, fleets could consist of almost 100 ships of various sizes, but by the middle of the 18th century, ship-of-the-line design has settled on a few standard types. Older two-deckers, with 2 complete decks of guns, of 50 guns, which were too weak for the battle line but could be used to escort convoys. 2-deckers of between 64 and 90 guns that formed the main part of the fleet, and larger 3 or even 4-deckers with 98 to 140 guns that served as admirals' command ships. Fleets consisting perhaps 10 to 25 of these ships with their attendant supply ships and scouting and messenger frigates kept control of the sea lanes for major European naval powers while restricting the seaborne trade of enemies. The most common size of sail ship of the line was the 74, named for its 74 guns, originally developed by France in the 1730s and later adopted by all battleship navies. Until this time, the British had 6 sizes of ship of the line, and they found that their smaller 50 to 60 gun ships were becoming too small for the battle line, while their 80s and over were 3-deckers and therefore unwieldy and unstable in heavy seas. Yeah, so like if it's too small, then you just get destroyed by the bigger ships. If it's too big, then you can't move them, and they were unstable because they're too heavy. So the medium-sized ship around 74 guns was the ideal. Their best were the 70-gun 2-deckers of about 46 meters long on the gun deck, while the new French 74s were around 52 meters. In 1747, the British captured a few of these French ships during the War of Austrian Succession. In the next decade, Thomas Slade, surveyor of the Navy from 1755, along with co-surveyor William Bately, broke away from the past and designed several new classes of 51 to 52 meter 74s to compete with these French designs, starting with the Dublin and Bologna classes. Their successors gradually improved handling and size through the 1780s, blah 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 blah. So they mostly settled on 74 guns. The largest warship in the world, ordered by Ottoman Sultan Mahmud II, built by the Imperial Naval Arsenal on the Golden Horn, 128 cannons on 3 decks, manned by 1,280 soldiers. So that was the biggest. But being big isn't necessarily good. I mean, sure, being big means you can last longer. And you have more cannons to shoot at the enemies, but at the same time you're less maneuverable, because look, all the cannons are placed on the side of the boat, right? So if anyone can sail behind you or in front of you, then your cannons don't hit them at all, whereas they can hit you. So being maneuverable is quite important. Also, this is not accurate because there's 3 rows of cannons here, which makes this a massive ship. Whereas the Jersey, hold on, HMS Jersey is a 60-gun 4th-rate ship of the line, which means it should only have 2 decks of guns. Look at that, it's 2 decks of guns there, and there's only 60 guns, so there's only 30 on the side. Whereas here, there's 1, 2, 3 decks of guns. This ship is bigger than it should be. The actual Jersey wasn't quite this big. And conveniently, all the soldiers are gone. That's good. Not that we can go inside though. The wheels are still here. Why would the wheels still be here? Is there anything for us to do here? No, not really. Alright, so there's not much for us to do except just to look around. The prison ship. Alright, so there's that. And I think that pretty much ends our architecture tour of the game. There are other Animus entries. Let me just quickly skim through these. Frontier, North Bridge, like these, it's a wooden bridge. Devonport Homestead, Isaac Potts House, Territory Boston Light. These are, I'm not gonna go through these. Others, Printer's Shop, Market, Independence Hall. Oh, this is a. We have visited these places in the missions, but we can't go back to them. I'm not gonna go through all of that. But there's a lot of other stuff for you to look at if you own the game. Dead Chest Island. Yeah, so that's not all that important. And then there's other entries too, like people, individuals. Kind of read up on all the characters in the game if you want. I'm not gonna do that on video. But the game's not really over because there's still DLC. So when we come back, we go back to gameplay and we play the Tyranny of King Washington DLC. I'll see you guys in the next video.